What we need is not more medication, but more education, because the best prescription is knowledge. This is Exposé coming to you live from Lagos, Nigeria, every Monday on Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook simultaneously. And I'm the regular host, Tony Akinyemi. Don't forget, what we need is not more medication, but more education, because the best prescription is knowledge. Hello and welcome to Exposé with Tony Akinyemi. Today we are going to be engaging an MD to talk about quite a number of medical conditions and various alternative and integrative approaches to addressing them. Don't forget that our axiom on Exposé is what we need is not more medication but more education, for the best prescription is knowledge. Today, I'm honored to have a medical doctor, an integrative medical practitioner. I met him quite a couple of years ago. We were introduced to each other by the late Bill Henderson, and ever since, we struck a chord with each other. I've visited his clinic in Florida, and today we are honored to have him on Exposé. Please join me to welcome Dr. Carlos Garcia. Dr. Garcia, you're welcome to Exposé.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your time and your consideration. It's a privilege being here with you.
Thank you very much. Now, our audience would like to meet Dr. Garcia. Who is Dr. Garcia? What's your background? And what have you?
So I went to the medical school, University of Massachusetts in Worcester, Massachusetts. I graduated from the medical school. I became an anesthesiologist. I practiced mainstream medicine, which is anesthesia, for about 10 years. Then I had an accident at home, and I was too young to retire. And I basically was doing various different things just to entertain myself. And one of my friends basically said, look, there's this clinic that does alternative medicine, and I think that you should go and just babysit it to do something, because you need to do something with your life. You're too young just to sit at home. And so I went there, and the big plan, believe it or not, was to take notes, because I was educated that alternative medicine does not work, that alternative medicine is a joke, that alternative medicine is something that people should not be doing. And this clinic happened to be primarily having to do with chelation therapy. And so what I noticed was that people were beginning to reverse their high blood pressure, their type 2 diabetes. Circulation would improve, memory would improve, visual acuity would improve. And one time, I remember taking about a 3-hour shower, because I think in the shower sometimes. And I had just written a prescription to decrease the medication from a person who had high blood pressure. And this concerned me, it bothered me. And I was perplexed by why I was bothered by my actions, which were perfectly justified. Turns out that what was bothering me was that I had done something that was told to me was impossible, which was, once you're getting on medications, with the exception of antibiotics, you will always be on medication. You never get better. Diseases only get worse. And all pharmaceuticals do is delay the progression of disease. Whereas what I noticed was that you can actually help the body heal. So the concept that doctors don't cure was totally foreign to me, as it is to many practitioners. And the first thing I had to learn was two things. one, to recognize what I don't know is, if not more important than what I think I do know. Two, to learn to say I don't know, because if patients expect me to have
Wow.
knowledge of everything, then nothing, people can't expect me to know everything. People who do are people who shouldn't be coming to me. And lastly, what's important is that people need to understand that they have to participate in their healthcare. Participating in your healthcare is the most important thing that an individual can do. In order to do that, you have to establish a relationship between the doctor and the patient. So all these things are what we had to learn, or what I had to learn, because it was never really taught. It was always taught to what's the diagnosis, treat the diagnosis. And so when you think about it, people are not their diagnosis. You're not a hypertensive walking down the street. You're not a diabetic walking down the street. You're the same individual with either high blood pressure, diabetes, pancreatitis, whatever disease you may have. So these are all very important things for doctors to learn and for patients to learn. And so in order to make a relationship, you need to start building a bridge. And the way I build bridges is by trying to educate people with what I call a 101 education. I'm not here to give you a PhD education. I am here to give you a rudimentary building block education that you can understand what I'm trying to convey, so that you can then understand why I'm asking you, say, not to eat sugar if you're diabetic, or why you need to do some exercise if you're hypertensive. Whatever the problems are, it's my job to get you to understand what is going on and why you should or should not do things.
Thank you very much. In the course of your answer, you did mention a terminology that I am familiar with, but I'm not sure if our viewers are all familiar with that terminology. You mentioned chelation therapy. Would you like to shed some light on that?
Sure. Chelation therapy, actually, the word chelation comes from the word, a Greek word that means to claw out. In other words, to extract. And so the history of chelation goes back to the early 1900s, when it was actually the EDTA was invented in Germany. You fast forward to the end of World War II. During that time, the paints used, I believe, everywhere were lead-based paints. And so at the end of World War II, the US Army had, or by that I mean the US Armed Forces, had a problem with lead for painting ships, for example, and planes and the like. So there was an awful lot of lead exposure within the armed forces. And it's been known since the early 1900s that people in the dye industry that have heavy metals to make dye colors used EDTA to clean out pipes and to clean out, to help people. So they used EDTA on the participants of the armed forces that had lead toxicity. As they followed those individuals for years, they noticed that these individuals had a less incidence of cardiovascular incidents, heart attacks, strokes, and others. And so doctors began to use EDTA to see if they could either prevent or manage hypertension, diabetes, and other medical conditions. Then the politics gets into it. They didn't want something that was not patentable, because you cannot patent EDTA.
Right.
Patenting allows you to take a product that costs pennies. Yes, it talks a lot of money to do R&D, but in essence, it costs pennies to produce once the R&D is done, and then charge many, many times over what it costs to make. So again, patenting is where people make a ton of money. If you cannot patent a medication, the medical complex is not interested in using it or promoting it. You're only promoting what can be patented, which makes a great deal of money. And in fact, if you look at the world, you'll see that that drugs, the same medication made by pharmaceutical industries, the price all over the world varies dramatically. And this is very important to understand, that the price isn't fixed. And that's why a lot of Americans want to buy drugs in Canada, because the Canadian drugs cost less than they do in America, but they're identical, made in the same pharmaceutical complexes.
Right. Thank you so very much for shedding light on that. So if I understood you clearly, it means that chelation therapy pulls out heavy metals from the system. Is it only lead, or are there other metals as well that can be chelated?
So there are a few different types of chelators. You have EDTA, which is good for many heavy metals, cadmium, lead, and those kinds of metals. Then you have another set of chelators, DMSA and DMPS, really big, long names. I can't even pronounce them. That's another one of those wonderful things. Pharmaceuticals have they have a whole new vocabulary for themselves, because you can never pronounce the drugs. But at any rate, nonetheless, DMPS and DMSA are specific for mercury. And then you have another one, desferol, which is specific for iron. So there are conditions where there's iron being stored in the liver in excess. And so you use desferol to get that iron removed. The interesting thing about what people don't understand, and this is important, is that many times patients will go to their doctor and they'll say, I think I have heavy metal toxicity. Mm-hmm. And the doctor will say, well, why? And they'll tell them whatever the story is. So the doctor will go draw blood. The blood will come back normal. And so what the doctor has to do, in order for you to understand whether you have lead poisoning, for example, let's just stick with lead, makes this conversation simple. So if you think you have lead toxicity and you come to me and you say, doc, I have been around lead. I was a welder for many, many years, 10, 20 years. I think I have heavy metals. I draw blood. Most likely the heavy metals will come back normal. But then I have to challenge you. I have to give you like 5 chelation therapies, because what happens is chelation goes inside the cells. Right. Why does it go inside the cells? Well, because our bodies are conditioned to buffer problems. In other words, if something is very toxic, it wants to dilute it, or it wants to sequester it so that it doesn't cause major catastrophic failure. And our brains does that for us automatically, thank God. So what chelation does is it pulls it back out into the bloodstream. When you have a high level in your blood, you have the symptoms, but then the body puts it inside the cells. As it puts it inside the cells, your symptoms go down. You feel better. However, it is inside the cells where the lead will cause its damage. And so by doing the challenge of 5 chelation therapies, then you're going to extract it. The patient will be, if he's very toxic or she is very toxic, will feel badly. And then when you check the blood, you will find out that indeed the blood has a higher mercury level or lead level in this example that we're talking about. And you'll be able to show this person that, look, you do have lead toxicity.
Very clear, very clear. Now, we'll be going on a very short break at this time. When we come back, we'd like you to identify or underscore some of the symptoms or medical conditions that can be occasioned by heavy metal toxicity, for example. If somebody has heavy metals in their body, lead, mercury, cadmium, arsenic, whatever, what kind of medical conditions, what kind of symptoms, what kind of problems can it generate for that person? When we come back from this short break, please don't go away. Hi, Tony Akinyemi is my name, and I've written about 20 books to date. More are in the offing. Out of the 20 published books, to my credit, 6 of them are on healthy living. And I want to recommend these resources to you, to access them either digitally online or to get your hard copies. For digital access, you can visit amazon.com or familabooks.com. And for physical copies, you can visit the Shepherd stores at 18 Shogunle Street, Abule Onigbagbo off Mobolaji Bankantoni Way between Echo Hospital and Sheraton Hotel Ikeja to obtain your copy. You can also contact the email address on the screen or the telephone number or send a WhatsApp message and you'll be guided as to where to get any of the copies. God bless you as you access these resources. They will inform you and the information will help to transform your health and that of your family as well as that of the people in your sphere of influence. God bless you and thank you. Welcome back. This is Exposé with Tony Akinyemi, and I am your regular host. And it's an honor to have Dr. Carlos Garcia in the house. He's been talking to us about himself, about his practice, and about his experience over the years. Trained as an allopathic medical doctor, and now practicing alternative and integrative medicine in addressing a broad spectrum of medical conditions. He's talked to us extensively about chelation therapy and how to pull out heavy metals from your system. Now we want Dr. Garcia to talk to us about what are the implications if you have heavy metals in your body.
Well, if you get exposed to heavy metals, initially it gets absorbed into your bloodstream. When it starts doing that, it starts altering our physiologic chemistry. And then we begin to have sensations. Now, what are our sensations? Well, you could have nausea, you could have headaches, you could have not feeling well. And that's a very, it's very important because when you tell me as a physician, I don't feel well, I understand what it means because I have not felt well. But what is important is for you to begin to document what is different in your feeling, what feels differently, because that's crucial in giving me information as to what I need to look at, because it's very important that we understand and be able to focus at the problems. So initially you're going to have generalized malaise and not much is going to happen. And then what happens is you feel better. So when you feel better, you tend to ignore it. Like if your muscle hurts, you'll rub it, you'll do whatever it takes. But if the next day you wake up and your muscle doesn't hurt, you'll say, doesn't hurt. And you'll move on and you'll forget about it because it doesn't hurt. And that's one of the problems. See, medicine has taught us incorrectly that if it doesn't hurt, it must be okay.
Right.
And so if something hurts, it is incumbent upon you that if it lasts for more than I'd say a couple of days, and this would, that you go seek attention, even if it gets better. Or at the very least, open a diary and write down the date, because you're going to forget, and what was your sensation, and try to remember what you were doing a week before. Keep a chronology because it's all in the history. The history is so important. If you don't take a detailed history, you will not understand why the patient is ill. And so when you start feeling this malaise, you'll start saying, well, I was feeling good. And then, I went into, I don't know, a refinery and then I felt badly. Right. That tells the doctor, what kind of refinery was it? What were you doing? You were blowing glass or you were soldering. What is the history? Because that's going to point us into the direction of what is going on with you. And so for you to participate in your healthcare means keeping a diary as to when you started feeling poorly, what those symptoms are, because even with heavy metals, as I said earlier, the body is going to buffer. Your body is going to try to minimize the discomfort. So how does it minimize it? It tries to eliminate it through the liver. It tries to eliminate it through the kidneys, poorly through the lungs usually, and poorly through sweating or through your skin. So it's going to try to minimize the discomfort because you don't like feeling badly.
Yeah.
And your body will respond to your feelings, that it does not feel good, so therefore I must do something. And one of the areas that the body uses in order to protect us or help us feel better, it doesn't necessarily protect us, but it buys us time, is to move things inside the cells. Well, it moves them into all cells. It just doesn't selectively say, I'm going to put it in the fat. So if the fat cells get damaged, who cares? No, it goes all different. All cells are affected, and it takes time for the pathology. So in the 50s, when they had lead-based paints in houses, the paints that you bought at the store had lead, and children who put everything in their mouths would eat lead chips that would fall off the wall, as they always do. They would feel poorly. They'd be sickly. A week or so later, they might feel better again. 2 years, 3 years later, they would have neurological complications. They would not learn as quickly. They would have inabilities to control their extremities correctly. So it's very important that you keep a history when you don't feel well. You don't necessarily have to go to the doctor, but if you keep a diary, you can always look back to see if it's a recurrent issue. If it is a recurrent issue, it is your body talking to you. Now, I would say that 99.9% of us, if not 99.999% of us, ignore what our bodies tell us. And this is how people get chronic illnesses. Things aren't well. We get over it. We tough it out. We plow through it. We use whatever excuse we want to use in order not to go to the doctor and not to do something differently. And so keeping a diary will help you identify recurrences that you will forget. Everybody forgets, myself included. That's why I keep detailed notes sometimes when I don't feel well, to see what's going on, stop the process of what I call living, and analyze, why am I not feeling well? What's been going on? How am I going to change it? And what am I going to do to help remedy the situation?
Thank you so very much, Doc. We've been spending a lot of time on chelation therapy. I just wanted to ask this one on chelation therapy. I know there are many other questions our viewers would like me to ask, but let me just ask this one. Maybe you can take 10 seconds to just respond to this. What is the chelation process like? Is it swallowing pills, or is it intravenous infusions, or how is chelation done if a patient walks into your clinic, for example?
That's an excellent question. So a very important fact: do not take oral EDTA. EDTA is the ingredient for most chelations. Do not take it orally because it will cause malabsorption in your stomachs, in your digestive tract. It will cause all sorts of havoc, and please do not do that. Now, there's other people who say, do the suppositories. Again, I don't do the suppositories because you cannot control the absorption of the EDTA. So in my facility, people, you need to check the kidney function. We start every patient at a quarter dose, a half a dose, and then a full dose. We give no more than 3 grams of EDTA because that's a safe dose to give people, and it works. Now, you need to keep a day of rest between each therapy. So you can do like a Monday, Wednesday, Friday, a Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. You should not do Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday because it is too stressful on the kidney functions. So the infusion is given through either arm. It is intravenous. It lasts anywhere from 2.5 to 3 hours per session. And you have to monitor the renal functions in order to make sure that the patient is able to continue doing chelation therapies. Now, the first 10 therapies of chelation are going to be relatively non-productive because we need to soften the plaque. Hard plaque is difficult to remove. Soft plaque is removed earlier. The curve that I tell people is like an S-shaped curve that goes like this. This is where you really make a lot of changes to get from this to the asymptote to the elevator portion. That takes about 10 to 15 chelations. So the first 10 to 15 chelations in most individuals tend to be very little productive, but from about 10 to 30 chelations is very, very productive. Now, you don't want to go 100% because, again, the top part of the curve where it goes this way, this part of the curve is very expensive to achieve, number one, and two, it's not clinically significant.
I was at your website today, Utopia Wellness website today, and I picked this statement there. It says, we offer programs designed for anyone who wants to enjoy optimal health, whether suffering from a chronic illness or simply wanting to prevent disease. That's what I found at your website today about Utopia Wellness. So my question is, would you like to elaborate on the various services available at Utopia Wellness that people can take advantage of, whether they want to reverse an existing disease or they just want to maintain wellness or prevent illness?
Certainly would. So one of the things, or one of the issues that mainstream medicine does not take into account is how to maintain the human body. Most doctors, I suspect, do not understand that about 85% of disease starts in the colon. Our gut is very, very important for our immune system, for our health, for our well-being. And I always talk to patients about the automotive industry. It's interesting that in America, many people buy the best oils possible, oils that are designed to last 100,000 miles. Yet they've been programmed to change it every 3,000 to 5,000 miles. And when it comes to healthcare, as we discussed earlier, if it doesn't hurt, people ignore it. And so when you have a hurt, when you have an ache, it's like the yellow light going on the dashboard. Something isn't right. And sometimes the dashboard light goes away. But at least if I see my dashboard light go on, I'm going to call my friends at the mechanic shop and say, I had this and it went away. What should I do? They may say, stop by and get a diagnostic. Or they may say, well, if it comes back again, let me know about it. But otherwise, let's just see what happens. And so that is what not feeling well is all about. And so how do you maintain feeling well? Well, when you go to your primary care doctor, they're just going to do the routine blood work, a CBC, a CMP, maybe a thyroid panel. Well, testing is all good and well, but what does that do for service? In other words, how is that helping your body detoxify or oxygenate? It isn't. It's like going to the mechanic with your car. He puts in the computer. He says, oh, you need to do blah, blah, blah. That's all testing does. Or if the testing shows nothing, he says, well, there's nothing wrong. So if he's a good mechanic, an old-fashioned mechanic, he'll go listen to the engine and he'll poke around. The newer mechanics will say, well, the computer says nothing, so there's nothing wrong, and call it a day. But every year you bring your car in for an oil change or some other thing. And this is what we're talking about. We're talking about the fact that every year people should do liver flush with herbal teas, gallbladder flush, which you can do with apple cider vinegar and olive oil, colonic irrigations, which are very, very important. Now, most people confuse colonic irrigations with doing, say, magnesium citrate, which you can take orally. The difference is that we develop a single layer skin in our colons, which flow just like a fish scale from our mouths to our rectums. And so what colonic irrigation does is it takes the water from the rectum towards the cecum. It goes against the grain. And just like when you're scaling a fish, when you want to take the scales off a fish, you put the knife at the tail and you move them to the head. You go against the scales, and then the scales bend over and they fall off. That's what colon therapy does.
Right.
And in my opinion, colon therapy is one of the best therapies that people can use, and it's been around for millennia. In fact, if people do investigations, you'll see that there are writings in Egypt about they were using papyrus leaves to do colonic irrigations by the Nile. So people have known for many, many years that the colon is an integral aspect of the human health, the human body, and it's integral for our immune system because we are exposed to many, many different toxins, not just airborne toxins, but toxins that we ingest.
All right. I think at this point we will go on another short break. And then when we come back, we'll be asking Dr. Garcia additional questions about the services available at Utopia Wellness. Don't forget that this is Exposé with Tony Akinyemi. What we need is not more medication, but more education. And we're having a full dose of education free of charge from Dr. Garcia today. Thank you very much on that. So we'll be going on this very short break. When we come back, we shall continue this conversation. Maranatha.
Maranatha. Maranatha.
Maranatha.
Maranatha. Maranatha.
Maranatha.
Maranatha.
Maranatha. Maranatha.
The King.
The King. The King.
The King.
The King. The King. The King.
The King is coming soon.
Hallelujah.
Have you been through stuffs and you survived? Guess what? It's time to set your world on fire. You never know who needs your light, your warmth, and courage. You are a survivor, and that's amazing. I Am a Survivor is Reverend Tony Akinyemi's newest book. Hurry now, grab a copy from the TSF bookstore.
Welcome back. This is Exposé with Tony Akinyemi, and today we are honored to have Dr. Carlos Garcia of the Utopia Wellness Center in Alsma, Florida, USA, as a special guest, talking to us about various alternative and integrative medical protocols. By the way, before I ask Dr. Garcia another question, I'd like you to know that he has a YouTube channel. Utopia Wellness has a YouTube channel, and they have many uploaded videos there. And we would like our viewers to please check on those videos. I watch them from time to time. Sometimes I'm the very first viewer when a new video is uploaded. Yeah, and I have found them very informative, very useful. Thank you for the work that you do. Right now, I'd like to ask you yet another question. You have mentioned chelation therapy, you have mentioned colonic irrigation, you've mentioned intravenous IV and what have you. Can you just give us in bullet form, without detailed explanations now, what are the various protocols and treatment protocols that you deploy at Utopia? If somebody a patient walks into Utopia, what are the different things available that that person can take advantage of? Something like hyperbaric oxygen therapy, something like whatever. All of those protocols available at your center that people can take advantage of for whatever reason.
So one of the things that, in order for us to be able to provide a service for you, we need to first understand why you're here. It's important that I understand what are you seeking to do. Now, we can go from chronic problems to I just want to maintain myself. So we'll take I want to maintain myself. I'm healthy, I have no complaints, but I know that in time I'm going to get sick. So what can I do to either minimize or prevent illness? So one of the things mainstream medicine says is, well, if you prevent something, how do you know you're going to get it? And my answer is, well, you're changing your oil in your car to prevent that your engine's going to be damaged. Yeah. So you're helping your body in order to either minimize damage or prevent damage. Now, if you prevent it and you never had it, you don't know whether you were going to have it or not. If you do have it, you don't know if it would have been worse if you had not done what you have done. So prevention is always a leap of faith, as it is in automobiles. And again, we have a lot of cars in America, and so therefore we maintain our cars because it's expensive to buy. And so people understand the car analogy. When a patient comes to my office, the first thing I need to understand is, why are you here? Are you here for a chronic problem, cancer, for example? Or are you here because you just want to maintain your body, your health, feeling well? And you know that over time, like everybody else's body, it's going to deteriorate. So you want to minimize the deterioration or slow it down if possible. And so for my vantage point, the history is going to tell me what I am going to offer you. Now, at the clinic, we can offer things such as hyperbaric chambers. We can offer intravenous infusions to build up the immune system. We can detoxify your liver, your gallbladder, your colon. We can deal with emotional issues, which is greatly undermined in Western medicine, because our bodies does what our mind tells it to do, whether we think about it or whether we don't think about it, which is subconsciously. And so the interaction between the patient and me, remember, a healthy medical practice or medical relationship requires that the patient and I reach an understanding. And for me to understand what you need, I need to understand what it is that has been going on in your life. And so a history is done. Now, if a patient says, well, you know, I'm 30 years old, I want to stay well, I have no problems. For that person, we would recommend a liver, a gallbladder, detoxification teas, colonic irrigations, some coffee enemas, some IVs with vitamins, minerals, antioxidants, and make sure that the teeth are healthy, because the teeth are very important in the human health. And in fact, if you go to my website, I did a recent video, it's about 6.5 minutes, on why root canal filled teeth are terrible for people to have. And I encourage your viewers to go there so they can learn about why they should not have root canal teeth procedures done. So it's very important. Now, then there are people who have aches and pains. And then again, the history comes into play. The most important question in a history is, when did you last feel well? That is crucial, because that at that moment is when your body changed, which means there's something there. And again, you have to explore the emotional components, the physical components, what's going on in your environment, so that again, we can offer you the services that you require or that you're looking for. And then there's the chronic person. The people who chronically get ill are people who have either failed to understand why people get sick. For example, most people think that cancer is the problem. It isn't. It's your symptom. The problem is, why did you allow cancer to grow? Why is cancer present now, not 10 years ago, not 25 years from now? So it's very, very important that people understand that diseases occur for a reason. In good medicine, you find out what the reason is. In Western medicine, they just want to treat the symptoms, which keeps you sick, but feeling better temporarily. Then when you get sicker, you have less compensation. And eventually, when you just treat the symptoms and don't treat the cause, you become chronically ill. All chronic diseases begin as an acute problem. The word acute in medicine means short-term. So if it's a short-term problem that is ignored and persists, with time, it becomes chronic. But it started as acute. All problems start as acute.
Right. Good information there. From what you just said, I wanted to ask another layer of question on that. what would you consider as those causes that culminate in cancer? What are the various things that can make an individual develop cancer, for example?
Cancer is a very complicated issue. So there was a doctor who just died, I would say about within the last 5 or 7 years. His name was Hammer. Heinrich Hammer was a medical doctor, a pathologist, who actually did very interesting work. He noticed that people who have cancer usually have an emotional component. So how did he prove it? He took about 500 patients who had different cancers. He questioned them individually. He put the answers in piles of what body part became infected with cancer first, because all cancers are viral diseases, according to Royal Rife. So when he read the answers, he found that there was a common thread to the answers. So when people have reproductive organ cancers, breast, ovarian, uterine, cervical, vaginal, penile, testicular cancers, these people have either lost a significant individual or felt betrayed by a significant individual. Now, significance is given by the patient. It is not limited to just family. It could be a mentor who took you, who was a college professor, or someone who helped you that you thought of as a very close friend or relative, or you see him as a second father or a second mother. Now, when you add Chinese medicine, the right side of the human body is associated with males in about 85% of the people. The left side of the body is associated with females in about 85% of the people. So when you look at the human body and you start integrating, which medicine doesn't do, Western medicine does not integrate functions. When you don't integrate other practices of medicine, then you begin to curtail your armamentarium to help patients. So when we start adding emotional components, when we start adding Chinese components, we're now able to try to say, okay, if you had cancer in 2021, when we could go back to about 2017, 18, 19, 20, or 21 to see if, for example, you had left breast cancer, if you had a significant female that betrayed you, or if you had a significant female that died. If you have liver, it's because you don't know how to manage anger. So there's many different variables and many components associated with cancer and where cancer is located. Because I spent 5 years battling one question, which is the flu comes every year, it changes, but it always attacks the head and the lungs, upper respiratory. But cancer, which Royal Rife showed, at least to my satisfaction, is by 2 viruses, presents all over the place. Some people have bone cancer. They have the weight of the world on their shoulders, for example. Liver, pancreas, stomach, gastrointestinal, bladder cancers, prostate cancers, and so forth, brain tumors. All these tumors are different body parts, but they're only 2 viruses. So why is it that these viruses have such a diverse presentment? Why don't they present like the flu does, always attacking that particular organ part, the head and the neck for the flu? And so that's what got me to start reading and stumble onto Dr. Hammer's work, and then Royal Rife work and other works that are very important in understanding the etiology of why cancer happens. Now, doctors will tell you, oh, it's genetics, especially when it comes to BRCA genes. Okay.
Right.
So you're going to blame genes. My question is, why did it not happen 10 years ago or 20 years from now? Why? Because if you're going to use genetics like the BRCA gene, the lady is born, or the girl is born with the BRCA gene from birth.
Yeah.
So if you had it from birth, why didn't you get it as an adolescent girl, or why didn't you get it as a 90-year-old woman? See, something triggers that gene expression.
Mm-hmm.
The trigger is the problem.
Right.
So you'll see a lot of families will say, well, my grandmother had breast cancer, my mother had breast cancer, my sister has breast cancer. I knew I was going to get breast cancer. This told this to allow breast cancer. Now, what I just said, mainstream medicine is going to say is not true. That is silly or worse. But just because they don't understand the human body, just because they want to limit their scope to what insurance pays or what pharmaceutical companies want to have done, is not my problem. My problem is to serve you. That's what I choose to do. In order to do that, I need to be able to scrutinize what people have learned and ask why. Because people want questions, or people have questions, and they want answers to these questions.
Right.
It's just that they're not usually willing to question the answer if it doesn't seem right. Whereas when you start questioning, you begin to understand what I said earlier. I recognize that I don't know everything, and I am not afraid to say I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And because I'm not afraid to say I don't know, people understand that. And then what happens is that's how you forge a relationship. You're being honest.
Right.
And nobody expects that to happen from a doctor. Nobody expects a doctor to have to know everything. They just expect honesty, or at least I do. And so cancer has a component. Now people say, what about food? Okay, what about food? If food is the major cause for cancer, right? Then explain why Haiti doesn't have a higher per capita. Per capita means per 100,000 people per unit of people, okay? So why doesn't Haiti have a higher per capita incidence of cancer than America? Why don't those countries in Africa that have a terrible water supply or almost no waste management systems in place have a higher incidence of cancer per capita than America does? Once you start questioning, then the narrative begins to fall apart. That's what people need to understand. If the doctor is honest, he'll answer your questions. If your questions are good, he won't get upset, or she won't get upset. When you start asking the doctor and you get him to the point where he or she has to say, I don't know, usually you get escorted out, or the doctor gets angry. Anything to shut you up.
Mm-hmm.
And you're there to learn.
Right.
You've hired me to give you a 101 education, not a PhD, but a 101. Here's what I know about your disease. Here's how I think you got it. Here are the components of your disease.
Thank you very much, Dr. Garcia. We've come a long way today. Definitely would like to have yet another episode with you so we can take more questions. But for today, as we round up this first episode with you, I'd like you to mention your book. I know I got a copy of that book that discusses the emotional connection with cancer. I think you did a book on that. I want you to talk to our viewers on how to get a copy of that book. That's one. And then the second one is to give us your details, the details of your clinic. If someone wanted to contact you, your website, your telephone contact for people to contact you.
Perfect.
Right.
Let me put the book here. This is the book, Cancer is a Symptom.
Right.
You can buy it on Amazon. You can order it online. And it's, whenever anybody writes a book, it's usually for the author. I tell people, read this book from cover to cover like you would any novel. And then go back and read the parts that apply to you. Because not all of it will apply to you. It's not everybody has all the issues that we cover in this book. That's number one. As far as the websites are concerned, they are utopiawellness.com Utopia Wellness.com, or utopiacancercenter.com. If you wish to call, then please call us at 727-799-9060. That is 727-799-9060. And I'll be more than happy to speak with anybody who has cancer for free, to evaluate their problem, to tell them how to deal with cancer in a natural modality if they're caring to do so. For people who want just wellness tune-ups, again, go to Utopia Wellness, call the clinic. We can talk on the telephone so that we can communicate. You don't have to be here in person. We've perfected that so that we can communicate back and forth to be able to understand the problem, generate a treatment plan, send you by email the treatment plan for your consideration with an estimated time of what it's going to take. It's very easy to keep your body healthy.
Thank you so very much, Dr. Carlos Garcia of Utopia Wellness Center in Oldsmar, Florida, USA. For those of us in Africa, if you want to dial that number, remember to put +1 before you dial that number. Yeah, so that it can go through. Thank you very much once again for your generosity with information and the various opportunities that you've provided for prospective patients or clients. I know you call some of your patients campers. Is that correct?
This is true. They wanted to be called campers. You're here to learn.
Right.
It's like a training camp. We're here to figure
Right.
out what, and you're here to figure out what to change.
So we want to thank you very much for your time today. And one thing I always do with professionals when we bring them on Exposé is to negotiate some deals with them on behalf of our viewers. Because in Africa, we thrive on negotiation. We go to the grocery store and we even negotiate the price of grocery in the grocery store. So what I want to ask is, if anyone comes to Utopia and says, "Oh, I saw you on Exposé and that's why I'm here," is there any special discount for them?
We will give them a discount if they say they're from Exposé, provided that they give us their email so that we can tell you who's responding and how you can get in contact with them and get their feedback also,
Right.
so that you can do it. But yes, we will be happy to do
Thank you
that.
very much. Very good. Thank you so much. We appreciate that. So viewers, we thank you for spending your Monday evening with us. Exposé comes to you 8 p.m. Nigerian time every Monday. And we've been honored to have Dr. Carlos Garcia with us today, sharing a lot of information with us. Next week, by the grace of God, same time, we're going to bring Dr. Garcia back and question him further on many other areas of integrative medicine. And I do believe that it's been worth your time this evening. We look forward to seeing you next week again on Exposé. Don't forget, what we need is not more medication, but more education. For the best prescription is knowledge. To be informed is to be transformed, and to be uninformed is to be deformed. We thank you, Dr. Garcia, for bringing information to us today. We'll see you next week, same time. God bless. Have a very wonderful week ahead. Bye-bye.
How far can you go on your own? How fast can you run on your own? We take you far. We take you high. We make it fast. Divine Impact Summit takes you far, gives you speed. DIS, where divinity meets humanity. Maranatha, the King is coming soon. DIS 2022.
Discover fundamental truth that will transform your health and empower you to live a life void of sicknesses in this new book by Reverend Tony Akinyemi, Nature versus Nurture, Get a copy to experience it for yourself. Please visit TSS Bookshop now to grab a copy.